Hi everyone, I'm Noreen Timoney, President of the Rotary Club of Miami, and we are so happy to be joined today by David Landsberg, CEO and President of Goodweell Industries South Florida. He brings a wealth of experience in community service as well as in the publishing industry. He was publisher and editor of the Miami Herald for almost 8 years. We're so delighted and we know you will enjoy today's meeting. Thank you.
I'm gonna do my best here not to screw up the good Landsberg name that all the Rotarians know.
Oh, that ship sailed. That ship sailed, honey.
So, first of all, I just want to thank you for making some time over lunch for me to tell you. Really, most of you know some about Goodweell, but I'm going to give you a little bit of history and kind of give you a little update on what your Goodweell here in South Florida has been up to. So first of all, the genesis of Goodweell, for those of you that don't know, was in Boston in 1902. So like the city of Miami, we're pretty much celebrating 120 years as a nonprofit. And Goodweell started with a Methodist minister in Boston who had the brainstorm of instead of continuing to give handouts to people in need, he would have the people in need help fix up those handouts and then sell them and generate cash flow and train people to be able to work in the workforce. So really the original nugget of an idea around Goodweell, and it stays this today, is really workforce development. So if you took all of our missions of every local Goodweell across the country, and there are 158 of them, you would see a similar thread around workforce development. Here in South Florida, it's the same thing, except we are probably deeper into developing people with disabilities for the workforce than any other Goodweell in the United States. And we develop people with disabilities and people with other sorts of barriers to work. And I'll tell you a little bit about that today, a few things that you might be surprised by. First of all, I'll tell you, we came to Miami in 1959, or were brought to Miami in 1959, because we're a locally managed, locally governed nonprofit. We are really a local charity that it took some pillars of our community to get started. And the names will be household names to you. So they were James A. Ryder, the Knight brothers of Knight Ritter, and Leonard Abbas, father of Leonard Abbas Jr., were the founders of Goodweell in South Florida. And that was the group that said, we've got to have one of these here in Miami. Some like me might remember that Miami had 400,000 people. Miami-Dade and Broward had 400,000 people at the time. And now we're a region that has over 4 million. So a lot has changed, and Goodweell has changed over the years as well. We started, like all of our other brother and sister Goodweells, with taking in donations and opening stores. And many people don't know anything beyond that. They know that when I'm done with this shirt, it really ought to go to Goodweell. It ought to not be thrown out because it has use left in it. And that really is the funding mechanism of the nonprofit, but it's not the nonprofit mission. The nonprofit mission is about developing and helping people enter the workforce who ordinarily would not be, or have a terrible rough time trying to be a part of it. And it's only multiplied for people with disabilities. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that today. Any major metropolitan area in the United States has about 15 to 18% of its population that have a disability. When I say disability, I mean one that would be a federally defined disability. Somebody that has a developmental disability or an intellectual disability or a physical disability or a mental disorder that is significant enough to be disabled. So we pretty much use the same definition as the federal government. You might be surprised to know that there are about 470,000 people in Dade and Broward that have a disability. 470,000 of our neighbors have a disability, which is an awesome large group of people. But what is really stunning out of the adult disabled population is that 82% of that population is not working, right? Either unemployed or the government's definition of not haven't looked in 6 months. And that's horrific. And so I want you to understand why that is, because it'd probably be easy for all of us to assume, well, they're disabled. They're not able to work, maybe. Well, we've been here since 1959, and we know that's not the truth. Or maybe they're disabled and they're on disability, so they don't have the desire to work. Well, that's not true also, because what we find when we get to know disabled folks is they want to have an opportunity like we have, an opportunity to be fulfilled by work. And that is something that comes hard, not just in our community, but in any. And this is not a slam on private industry, but the truth is private industry does not really want to hire people with disabilities. They are much more worried about finding somebody that can do two jobs than somebody they might have to work with in order to have them be successful in their business. And so we saw that gap in 1959 and continue to work every single day to make opportunities happen for people with disabilities. So let me tell you just a little bit about how we do that. Obviously, our stores operation continued to grow. We started with 3, 4, 5 stores. Today, we have 36 stores across Dade and Broward. Those stores employ 1,200 people, and about 10% of the store employee roster is people with disabilities. And most of the rest of our employees in stores have some other barrier to work. So it's grown to be a very large operation. It's been a steady source of growth for us. It's been a funding mechanism for the nonprofit, which means we're a different sort of nonprofit, right? We're not entirely dependent on grants or funding or state funds or public funds. We try and rely on ourselves to generate the majority of what we use in the organization. And so the stores were a start of it. Goodwills that came before us in between the early 1900s and 1959 started doing other things other than taking in donated goods and selling them in stores. And one of the very first ventures they worked on was custodial and janitorial services for business. And we followed in that path shortly after we opened. So for about 35 years now, we have been in the janitorial business. And so what does that mean? How did we accomplish that? Well, we started like a lot of other Goodwills, asking our governments to allow us to clean their buildings. And we started small, learned how to function in that business, and really essentially never lost a customer. So you'll be happy to know that when either a state, federal, or local Dade County building needs to be cleaned, those governments call on Goodwill to clean that building at night most of the time when you don't see Goodwill people there. But that business has grown into 130 buildings and about 7 million square feet that we clean each night in government buildings and courthouses and every police station in the 2-county region and every military base. And so that organization now supports 250 people with disabilities who learn how to professionally clean a public building. And just so you know how we achieved success with that, you think, well, how do you take someone with a significant disability and make sure that's possible? And I'd say that it's all about job design. We don't take someone with a disability and say, hey, go to the federal courthouse and make sure it's clean by morning. We train that person to be the very best at the role that they have. And so it's very much about job design. It ends up so that we work a lot of repetition and a lot of reinforcement training into what that person is doing, which would be kind of boring for us, but is the key to success for people with a whole spectrum of disabilities. In fact, they don't often want to encounter cranky people in the building or cranky customers in the store. They want to be able to do their job, have it be measurable, and they don't want to be cut any slack for it. You think, well, we would be here hiring people with disabilities and say, well, you know, Joe's disabled. Whatever he gets done today is okay. Well, that's not our model. That's not how we've achieved success. Joe has a goal, just like all of the rest of us have had a goal through our working careers. And that is the part of this that makes it real work, a real functional job for real pay. And that is what ends up being life-changing for people with disabilities. because they are then fully engaged in work and being able to experience the gratification that comes with accomplishment, which in large scale doesn't happen without us. We, like other Goodwills across the country, really originally thought our mission would be training people and turning them out in the workforce. And then we encountered what I told you about, which is it's very, very, very difficult to place people and private businesses. That doesn't mean we don't try. We place about 100 people a year in a variety of businesses in South Florida. We have some great partners who are always willing to help. You all know when you go to Publix, you're more likely to see somebody with a disability than many other places. They have a dedicated, committed program for this, and for that we're thankful, but there are hundreds of employers that participate. But the truth is, if we hadn't figured out how to grow ourselves and make available job slots for people with disabilities and other barriers, we wouldn't have had the chance to employ that many. So somewhere along the line, we had a sea change about our strategy. And that strategy became growing businesses that fit in a niche in the market and being able to first and foremost recruit people with disabilities and other barriers to work. And that's what we've been dedicated to over the last 35 years. And quite frankly, it's worked very, very well. Shortly after cleaning government buildings, we moved on to what we could make for government. What kind of product could we make? And we taught ourselves how to sew. And we started that with 6 people cutting and sewing a military uniform, which we failed at for about a year and a half. Finally, a year and a half later, we rolled out with a uniform that the military said, that's it. Why don't you make more of them? And today, we have 1,200 people cutting and sewing U.S. military uniforms, mostly for the Army. I'd say everybody that goes through basic training or is deployed from the East Coast is wearing a Goodwill of South Florida uniform, either for regular work on a base or for combat. We're very, very proud of that. Shortly after we became successful at that, we started making the United States internment flag that is presented at military funerals. And today, your Goodwill in South Florida makes a quarter of the internment flags in the entire United States. And we're very proud of the sewing shop that we've got here. Just to tell you briefly, in my short time after leaving private industry, we opened a very large commercial laundry. We focused that laundry on healthcare. So anytime anybody goes to a hospital, and most all of Dade and part of Broward, those sheets and towels and blankets are washed by people with disabilities at Goodwill. We built that plant consciously in Liberty City because we knew that we'd have some number of people that would be local. And to our surprise, that plant is now 30% employees from Liberty City, which means 85 of our 300 employees are from Liberty City, which probably, I think, makes us the largest employer in Liberty City. And we're, aside from helping people with disabilities, happy to have other groups that we're focused on making opportunity happen for. So the growth has continued organically today, where we are at the point that Diane mentioned. We have 3,100 people working for us. We have 1,200 people with a federally defined disability. That's the largest disabled work group in the state of Florida, one of the largest in the Southeast. We have about another 1,200 people that have some kind of other serious barrier to work that may not be quite a disability, but has significantly had them derail at job interviews, or if they have gotten a job, derail at that job. And really, how I like to define it so it's clearest is, your Goodwill is pretty much the employer of last resort for people in our community. And we're very proud to be able to do that. And we're even prouder that the folks that we have come work at Goodwill get trained well enough, have job design that's appropriate enough, that they end up being as productive as people without disabilities. And that is the magic in it, because we use the funding that we put together to employ, train and deploy people with disabilities And those folks with disabilities achieve individual productivity. And that productivity allows each one of these businesses to cash flow and then contribute to the nonprofit, making it 96% self-funded, which is really a US best practice. It doesn't happen very often. And the other metric that we're even prouder of is what we do with the money. So it's not about where the money comes from, but it's about where it goes. And so you know that nonprofits are evaluated often on how much of their expense goes to program expense. And your Goodweell of South Florida's efficiency is 96%. So 96% of every dollar spent goes into program expense of either training or paying people with disabilities and other barriers for work. And so we're very, very proud of what we've got here. Honestly, we'd love to have the group come and visit. I'm sure Diane or others could see it. I think you would be in awe to see it at work and see the pride of the people that work here and understand that they may have started out as the lesser served part of our area, but have ended up like everybody else. Come to work on time. In fact, our HR people would probably say they have more problems out of non-disabled people than disabled people by far. They take their job seriously. They come to a professional atmosphere. They conduct themselves well, and they're darn happy to have work and be able to continue. One last thing you should know is people that come to work at Goodweell may stay for a very long time. They may stay for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and beyond. And some may leave us in a year or a year and a half. But when they leave us, they're leaving us self-selecting out and being able to choose a job in the community and go at it with a lot more confidence and skill. And that is really our best outcome, right? And so every year, whether we grow or not, 1,000 of our 3,000 slots open up to be able to do this all over again with a whole nother chunk of our disabled community. And so that is really what your South Florida Goodweell is up to. I can't tell you how happy I am to do this as a second career. When I walk in every day and see the group of people I work with, I know I'm the one who's blessed. And so I can tell you I've never been happier to be able to serve in this way, in this incredibly unique mixture of something businessy, but also something completely mission driven. And so, you know, it is called a social enterprise when something looks like business, smells like business, but all of the cash flow goes to a nonprofit cause. And your Goodweell here in South Florida on its own is probably a national best practice social enterprise.